Yeah, no problem. We'll get started. So first of all, my name is Dennis O'Sullivan. I am a systems consultant with Quest Information Management, and today we're talking about database DevOps and looking at the challenges and possible solutions in bringing Oracle PL SQL development into a more agile development methodology and DevOps approach to software delivery. So this is the quick agenda. I'm going to start at a quite low base, but I won't spend too much time on it. Just almost like a refresher on what is agile development and DevOps first of all. Then we look at the challenges of adopting Agile and DevOps in a database environment. So, why is the database being so slow in being incorporated into DevOps? Then we look at some of the tooling that Quest have around DevOps incorporation. And if we resolve our issue, we will look at a demo. Okay, so starting with the basics, agile development. What is it and how does it differ from maybe what you're doing at the moment, or what companies traditionally did with the waterfall development lifecycle?
And I think, sorry for interruption, Dennis. Just if you don't mind, I'll add a little note in Russian. Коллеги, смотрите, если вам что-то непонятно, пожалуйста, сразу пишите в чат. Мы остановимся, пройдемся по этому еще раз. Если это вопрос перевода, и так далее, тоже мы с радостью поможем, если будет непонятно. Вот. И, пожалуйста, не стесняйтесь, пишите ваши комментарии в чатик. Вот. Мы с радостью, я, во-первых, почитаю параллельно, чтобы быть в курсе. Вот, и так далее. А еще я хочу напомнить, что в чудесной мегаполисовской платформе есть такая штука, как Check Presence. Вот. И я, например, могу послать вам очень противный звук, который тут есть в интерфейсе. Я, конечно, это делать не буду, но иногда буду проверять, кто смотрит. Все, большое вам спасибо за внимание. Okay, Dennis, sorry for interruption. Please go ahead.
No problem. So at a very basic level, this explains the differences between waterfall development, the traditional approach, and agile development. And while I'm sure everybody on the call is aware of what agile development is and waterfall development, for this to work, you need a buy-in from everyone really in the organization, including people outside of IT, the end users or the business. They need to understand, the change in the development methodology and how it will impact them. So I think this is a very useful slide just to present to non-technical people to show the differences and the benefits going forward with Agile. So I suppose if you take waterfall development first, we have our scale, our time scale and our value scale. So the value is the value we give back to the end users, the application we deliver, the bugs we fix, the new functionality, etc. Now, if you look at waterfall, generally you're given a project and we say it lasts 6 months. So you spend 6 months developing an application, and at the end of 6 months you deliver the full application to the end user. Now, because of that, there is an increased risk of failure, because the business haven't really been involved, the end users haven't been involved since the very early stages, and there's a chance that they could change their mind or situations may change, and if there is any changes required, it's far more costly to go back at the end of the project and redesign the application. If you look at an agile development, the main difference is you give small incremental sprints of development, and you give value back to the business and the end users in chunks, and you encourage the business to be involved at every stage, every sprint, and you also encourage them to change their mind if they're not happy. If they thought they wanted it one way, they change their mind, you encourage that, because at the end of the day, you want to deliver an application, that they want. So after every sprint, the users, they see some benefit. They review it, they sign off on it, they may request slight changes. So the next sprint then may be new features, some bug fixes, and maybe some alterations to the previous value. So by the end of the project, the end users and the business are much more happy with the end product because they've been involved at every stage and they are getting the application they want. And because of that, you have a much reduced risk of failure. It may take more time from the offset, but generally speaking, it takes less time than the traditional waterfall, because generally at the end of a traditional waterfall, you're going back and you're refixing and redesigning chunks of the application, whereas that's not the case with Agile development. So then there's DevOps. So DevOps really kind of evolved from Agile development. And I suppose at a simplistic level, if you're to explain what DevOps is, I suppose Dev, first of all, stands for development, and Ops stands for operations. So Agile really is about how you develop, the methodology behind developing, and going from these little sprints, or from, a big chunk of work for 6 months into little sprints of maybe 2 weeks. DevOps then is about how you deliver that software. And it's really all about the continuous, the theme of continuous delivery, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And that really boils down to automation. So automating as much of the software delivery lifecycle as possible. And for that really to work, you need to break down the traditional barrier that existed between your development environment and your operations. So your operations would include your server administrators, your database administrators, etc. And you can see here we have the software development lifecycle listed out in an infinity loop. And it's really all about, again, the continuous delivery of these sprints and automating as much of the software delivery lifecycle as possible. So as I mentioned, automation is really the key word around DevOps. And I think this kind of illustrates the different terminology you're going to come across. So up here we have our software delivery lifecycle put out on a straight line. And this green line represents the automation. So how much of this process have we automated? So you will hear terms like continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment. And really the difference is how much of the software delivery lifecycle have you automated. For example, the main difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is the automation of deployment. So continuous delivery means you have automated the building, the testing, and you've created a release that is ready to go to production. But you still haven't automated the deployment to the production. You may have deployed to a pre-production database, but the deployment to production is still a manual step. With continuous deployment, it's fully automated, that it goes through all the necessary environments in terms of testing, QA, user acceptance testing, etc. And once it passes all the checks, it's automatically deployed into production. Realistically, especially when it comes to the database, most companies look for continuous delivery. I haven't met a customer personally yet that is doing continuous deployments of code into their Oracle database. It's probably just a bit too much of a risk. But if you can get to the stage where you fully automated up to the point that you can, just review the change and execute it onto your database, I think that's a pretty good place to be and to aim to be. So DevOps in numbers, just to give it a bit of context. This comes again from the State of DevOps report that's released every year, and it is quite an interesting report because DevOps, I suppose, is on the cusp of an explosion, for want of a better word, at the moment. So according to the State of DevOps report, they're seeing companies that incorporate DevOps see 46% more frequent code deployments. They see a 21% reduction in unplanned work and rework, and a 19% increase in revenue. That would be revenue related to the software applications being developed. So again, when you talk to business, who again need to be fully behind something like Agile development and DevOps, these numbers are very important to convince them that this is a worthwhile avenue to go down, because it will take a significant amount of time to get up and running. It will require various tools to be implemented, such as version control software, software delivery tools, CI servers, etc. So you need to convince your business that this is worthwhile, and these numbers go a long way to convincing your business. So that's DevOps and Agile, what it is and why it's so popular at the moment. Now let's look at why the database hasn't been integrated in DevOps traditionally. If you have application teams within your organization, they're probably, doing version controlling of their application, doing automated code reviews, functional unit testing. They're using CI servers like Jenkins, and the database is still a very manual process. So are you trying to integrate the database into DevOps? So first of all, faster. Are you under pressure to build, test, and release software changes faster? So the business is putting pressure on the development team to release faster. It's okay for the application code because they're already doing Agile. They've automated a lot of the release, so the pressure falls on the database team. Then monitoring. Are you unsure how to effectively monitor the performance impacts of your database changes? So it's all well and good releasing more often, doing faster releases, but if you don't know how they're going to affect your database, then you're going down a very dangerous route. You need to be able to analyze the impact of these changes. And again, if you're doing automated releases, you're probably going to need to automate the impact analysis as well of these changes. You can't just fire stuff into the database and cross your fingers and hope it doesn't corrupt data or it doesn't lead to severe performance issues. Then thirdly, the database. Unclear how to bring database processes into the DevOps infrastructure. And this is the area we're going to focus on pretty much for the rest of the presentation, is why has it been so difficult to bring the database in? There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around database DevOps, that it's maybe the risks are too high. And this brings us on to risk. Concerned about the risk of making compromises in your desire to shorten release cycles. So again, you're under pressure to increase the number, but the last thing you want to do is compromise the stability and the credibility of your data and your database, and start taking shortcuts just in order to meet check some box that we have reduced our release cycles. And then finally, replicate. That you were required to replicate fast-moving changes to your hybrid database environment. So again, these changes have to go through, they start off in dev, then they go to, every company is different, but you might have a testing environment, a QA environment, a UAT environment, a pre-production environment, and it has to go through all these different changes. And there may also be several iterations. There might be a number of production servers and pre-production servers and non-production servers that they have to go through. So making sure the correct changes go to the correct servers as well takes quite a bit of management. So this is actually a video, but I'm not too sure if it's going to play. It's not going to play. This video is basically to represent what we would traditionally see in our customer base. When customers come to us and look at what we can do around Oracle database DevOps, I would say 90-95% will describe this exact scenario. So up here we have our application development team, and they're using source control management. They're version controlling their changes. They're using CI servers, and they're automating code reviews and unit testing. And then you have your database team, sometimes the same people doing different processes, or sometimes completely different teams. And all their processes are still very manual. And then when the business, they're asking for quicker releases, the application team are pointing at the database saying, we can go faster, but we can't apply all our application changes because we're waiting for a corresponding database change. And that's slowing up the entire process. And I suppose the reason for that, again, sorry, this is supposed to be a video, is it's much easier to do on the application side. It's not that the database people are lazy or don't want to do it. It's actually, can be quite difficult, because at the end of the day, your application, your Java code, your Oracle forms, they're files. You can, your release is dropping a new file. If there's a problem, if there's a bug, you can always drop back the old file. You can go back from V2 to V1. You can't do that in the database. You can't say, okay, after a couple of days, we found a bug. Let's revert back to the old state of the database. It's impossible, because the database is stateless. The data is constantly changing. You can't just revert back to a previous state. And again, I'll just skip on because that's supposed to be a video. But what this leads to is, because database changes are more difficult and companies traditionally haven't automated it, it leads to what's called the velocity gap. That what development teams end up doing is putting a lot of the business logic and the code into the application, because it's easier and it's faster to put it in Java than to put it into the procedure, because I can automate it. If there's an issue, I can revert it back quickly. So a lot of your logic ends up in the application and not in the database. Now there's, you could talk for hours about whether, where the business logic should reside, whether it should be in the application or the database. But I would say a general rule of thumb is, if it needs to do a lot of data processing, then it should reside in the database. Generally, from my experience, it runs faster in the database if it's, working with data than it does in the application. Because, for example, if you put a piece of code in your application and it has to, request several hundred or hundreds of thousands of rows from the database, it's probably going to do, several 100,000 network traffic between the database and the application. Whereas the application just calls a procedure in the database, the procedure gathers the data and delivers the entire data set to the application. So if you're working with, large data sets, requesting that or reading or writing large data sets makes far more sense for the logic to reside in the database. But companies are compromising for the sake of faster releases, that a lot of the logic is going into the application when it should reside in the database. So this is a kind of a checklist I've created myself in terms of bringing database into a DevOps lifecycle. Now there's a lot of moving parts within database DevOps, and this is quite a simplistic view of it. But the first thing I would insist on a customer doing, and really you can't move on to step 2 until you do this, is version control your database objects. So while you're always working on your tables, your procedures, your functions within your database, that every time you make a change on the database side, that a new version of that is cut and saved off into a file, and version control by Subversion or Git or TFS, whatever you use yourself. So that's step 1. It's an absolute prerequisite to any sort of automation or DevOps approach. It's actually quite simple to do. Very few people in the Oracle world do it really, for I don't know why, but it's actually quite a simple process to do. The next one is static code reviews. So this is basically seeing is your code of a certain quality. And these can be, following the industry standard code quality metrics, and or creating your own quality metrics. So we have a tool called code analysis in Toad for Oracle. And the best way to describe it is it's like spelling and grammar check in Microsoft Word. So if if I'm writing and I make a spelling mistake or a grammar mistake, it'll put a line underneath, a little squiggly line, saying there's an error there. Now, with our code analysis, we do the same thing for PL/SQL code. If you write some PL/SQL code that you might use a deprecated data type. Maybe there's old code from 9.9. It's using the long data type, and that's not supported in the newer Oracle versions. It's going to flag that. Okay, you can't use long anymore. You need to move to lob. If I don't close my cursors, probably the most obvious one for junior developers, that I have a procedure and I've opened the cursor and I haven't closed it. That again, it will flag this. So different things like this. If I'm using data type, something like a number, and I don't put a precision on that, I just use it. Just say it can be a generic number. Again, you can put rules around that. So the best way to describe it again is like the spelling and grammar check in Microsoft Word. And again, it's something that you can just enable. We out of the box we have, I think, 250 to 300 rules. You pick which rules apply to you, which are relevant to your particular scenario, and it will apply them as you're coding. And you can run the rule set against your legacy code as well. So it's something you can get up and running within 30 minutes to 1 hour, and you start realizing value from it almost immediately. The next step is the unit testing of database code. This is something that's going to take a lot longer than 1 hour, but it's probably the most important step of it all. So this is functional testing of your PL/SQL code. So we have a feature called Code Tester for Oracle. There's also UT-PL/SQL, which is a free tool. It doesn't have an interface, but it'll allow you to create basic unit tests. And you can just functional testing your code. So I won't speak much about it today, but you could go down the avenue of test-driven development. That I spoke to a customer that goes into Code Tester, creates all the unit tests. So, I'm creating a procedure, and this is what the procedure needs to be able to do. So you create all the unit tests first, then you start coding your procedure, and you keep coding your procedure until every unit test runs successfully. And that's the kind of a very, very simplistic view of test-driven development, that you create your tests and then you develop your code based on those tests. The test then can be saved into a centralized repository. So if I create 100 unit tests, Sergey 6 months later can access those unit tests and execute those unit tests. So if he makes a change to a procedure, he can see, have I broken something that was previously working? He can also add his own unit tests. If he creates a new bit of functionality, he creates unit tests for that, and then 6 months later, I can run his unit tests and see if I've broken something that was previously working. So you're getting into the area of regression testing as well. And it's a very interesting area to go in. just being able for developers themselves to be able to test their code. Now there's a big input required for this. These unit tests need to be manually created. It's not difficult, but it is time consuming if you have, a lot of the companies we speak to are legacy Oracle customers. They have, thousands of procedures, packages, functions, and it's just a time consuming task to create all these unit tests. There's no way around it. They just need to be created. But once they're created once and available to your entire organization or your entire development team. Then I suppose once you've gone through this, you've version controlled your database objects, you've checked the code quality, you've checked the functionality of them, so they're ready to go to the next phase. So this may all happen in dev, and now they need to go to QA, or they need to go to a UAT system, and there may be some manual testing done via the application at this stage. So you're going to need to generate, first of all, the script to move those code changes from development into UAT. So again, with Toad, you probably Toad users will be familiar with the schema compare and synchronization feature. So that you can use that to generate the script. And then we can also execute the release scripts. And then, yes, sorry.
Could you please check the chat? We have a question in English.
Oh, great. I kind of just presumed everything was in Russian, so I wasn't looking. Okay, so is this from Roman?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'll read out the question in case people can't see it. When it comes to version control of DB objects, do you mean PL SQL objects, i.e. packages, package bodies, procedures, or it is possible to say important golden image tables to be integrated into DevOps flow as well? So good question, Roman. I suppose what I was initially talking about is version controlling of your PL SQL objects, packages, functions, procedures, etc., as well as the tables. Now, not the data, but the structure, the DDL of the table. Now, yes, to the second point is you talk about the golden image of the tables to be integrated. Yes, that's something I come across a lot when speaking to customers is not only do we need to move code, there is data that needs to move with them. Now it may be data for testing purposes. So the data itself, not just the DDL. So you can also move the data. So it might be data for testing purposes, just we need to populate to do proper testing, or it also may be some seed data that, this data actually needs to exist for the functionality to work. So yes, absolutely, that would come under the generate and execute release scripts, and I probably need to flesh this out a little further. The release scripts could be DDL release, but also could be data release. And again, just talking about, there's many tools and many ways to do this, but just talking about Toad for Oracle for a moment, we have the schema compare, which will do the DDL scripts. We also have the data compare, which will allow you to bring across any seed data or an entire data. You can bring across the entire data. You may also need to bring the data from production. So you're moving from left to right. You're moving the DDL code. So the DDL code, the procedures and table structure, comes from dev into UAT, but the data comes back from right to left, comes from production back into UAT. So they meet in the middle for testing purposes. So that's also possible. And of course, if you're working with customers in the EU, or if you're just kind of looking to be PII compliant, you will need to obfuscate that data. So there may be policies in place that you cannot bring production data into non-production. So as you're replicating it, you can actually just obfuscate it, so it's not easily readable. Or else, again, using Toad for Oracle, you can just use our test data generator that will, tell it it's a varchar of 12 characters, and it will just create kind of a jumble data for you just to be able to test against. So absolutely, moving data, seed data, maybe from dev to UAT, and bringing back test data from production is very much a part of this. So while these three areas, they're very simple to understand, you integrate your version control software, you turn on the code reviews, and you build your unit testing. This is usually where I would spend 80 to 90% of my time with customers setting this up correctly. Mainly because there's no out of the box. While these are very much out of the box, there's no out of the box for generating and executing release scripts, because every customer is different. They have different requirements, they have different environments, and this is where it gets quite complicated. And if you're bringing in data replication, it makes it even more complicated. So finally, these are all manual steps I've been talking about so far. And I suppose, again, there's one thing, it's a bit of a cliche, but when I'm talking to a customer and they're starting off on the DevOps road, so to automate a process, you first have to do it manually. So you have to set up the manual process first, get that correct, and once it's correct, then we can look at the possibility of automating it. But you don't start by developing an automated process. Do it manually first, get it correct, and then automate it. And when we're talking about DevOps, and I mentioned continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, etc., the most obvious place to do this, well, it has to be on a server. You can't really realistically do this from your PC because it needs to be automated. It needs to go onto a server. And the most logical server for it to be on is a CI server. The most popular one being Jenkins, really. Quest ourselves, we use Bamboo. Hudson is a popular one because it's owned by Oracle, I think. And TFS is Microsoft one, Team Foundation Server. So Team Foundation Server acts as both a version control software system and as a CI server. You can kind of bundle it in one. And again, over 90% of the customers I speak to, they already have a CI server in-house. I would say 95% have a CI server in-house that some other team are using. The application server team, application development team will be using. So, that knowledge is already in-house, and that infrastructure is already in-house. And what we're trying to do is just plug into it, bridge the gap that's existed on the database, and fall in line with what the application team is doing. No reinventing the wheel, no saying to the application team, you need to incorporate this CI server, you need to incorporate this version control software to meet our needs. We try and fall in line with what they're already doing, because they're probably going to be your subject matter experts. They've been doing this probably for a long time. They're going to have knowledge of the version control systems, how they work, and how the CI server works. So we want to keep them on good terms. So this is kind of what it will look like. So we have our development teams here. So your database and application development teams. They're grouped into, we'll say, kind of agile pods, and they're doing their sprints. And everyone is feeding into a source control management system. They're version controlling their all their code, application code, and development code together in Git or Subversion or TFS. And you can set up projects then within that. So and different versions. So you can bundle an application change and a database change that need to go together. You can, your source control management will do all the management of that. We just integrate with it to get it all in there in the first place. Then once you've version controlled, you're looking at doing, we mentioned the unit testing and the code analysis. And again, we'll set those up manually, and then we look to automate them. And you need to automate these on a continuous integration server. Again, Jenkins seems to be by far the most popular. So Jenkins picks up the version the new version of the code from your source control management system, and it executes the code analysis against it. It does that for the application server and the database server. So it uses the DevOps Toolkit plugin to execute the code analysis for your PL SQL code. And then it, presuming everything passes, it's of a certain quality, you move on to the unit testing. And again, Jenkins will do what it always did with the application code in terms of unit testing. And then it will call out to the DevOps Toolkit plugin to do the unit testing of the PL SQL code, return the results, and you move on to the next phase. And that is release management. So again, you'll probably need to look at a release management system. Toad can do a certain amount of that, but to a certain extent. But again, depends what you're using on your application code in terms of releasing the changes then into your testing, your QA, your staging, and your production. And that will manage both your application code and Toad DevOps Toolkit will create the scripts. So it'll generate the scripts and potentially execute the scripts or feed into a release management system like Datakill or Flyway or something like that to do the release management of that. So I suppose basically what Toad DevOps Toolkit is, and this is the new product that we've launched, is taking stuff like code analysis and unit testing and generating schema compares and data compares, all this stuff you do on Toad for Oracle manually, and putting it on a server. And the server in question, a CI server. Now, if you don't have a CI server, you can just put it on a Windows machine of any sort, because this is written with PowerShell. Because PowerShell can be executed by any CI server, that's why we chose PowerShell. So you can just execute the PowerShell scripts. Toad DevOps Toolkit doesn't have a front end. It doesn't have a GUI. It's just a set of libraries that can be called from batch file or called via plugins on CI servers. And it's really, again, reiterate, what you do manually on Toad for Oracle on your laptop, automate it on a server. So again, we don't do the complete end-to-end DevOps. We're just plugging the holes that have existed. You're still going to need source control management. You're still going to need a CI server. Depending on the complexity of your release procedure, you may require a release management system. And we're just trying to plug the holes, such as code analysis, code review, generating the scripts for you in that regard. This is where I was hoping to do a demo. Sergey, have we had any hope in getting the screen going?
Well, actually, I've done everything that I can, but no. So I just want to offer to switch to WebEx. I'll just share the link to my WebEx session. You can find it in the chat. I think everything works well in WebEx, and I'll switch to Russian to discuss why we need to switch it. Hey, colleagues are coming.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, they are just joining. It's very good. And we have a lot of people connected to audio translation. That's pretty good. I just spoke with our partners. Next time we will definitely use WebEx.
Yeah, it's a bit more stable as well. Let me know once you think everybody is joined, Sergey, and I'll continue with the demo.
Again, please. Sorry.
Just let me know once everybody has.
Yeah, of course.
Am I coming across okay, Sergey? Volume-wise?
Not all of our colleagues are connected to audio, so I think we should wait a bit. As well, we have a question in the chat, but let me check. When everybody will join, and so if you don't mind, read it please and answer.
No problem.
I see not all of them connected to audio, and unfortunately it's going quite slow. Okay, let me... Dmitry, I can hear you. Okay, my beloved colleagues, I'll switch off your microphone because I hear some background noises. And Vitaly, you as well. Who is now translating? Up. Yeah. Switched off. And Sergey, your microphone too. And here. Okay, slowly, but our colleagues joining. That's good. Oh, let's wait another couple of minutes.
Do you think we have enough people to carry on, Sergey?
Actually, not so many connected, but well, okay. Let's go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's recording anyway, isn't it?
Anyway, yeah, we are recording it, so they will be able to listen it.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll just jump into the demonstration because I know it's 5 to 12. it will take a while. So going back to my checklist I had on screen earlier, the first point on my checklist was version control integration, or sorry, version control your database objects. Now the easiest way to do this is to integrate your IDE, which is Toad for Oracle, with your version control provider. You could also just set up a job to export the DDL to a file and version control that subfolder, but that's probably not the best way to do it, because you could go through multiple versions before, or multiple changes in a version, and it gets a bit confusing. The easiest way is to integrate directly your development tool with your version control software. And we have a module called Team Coding that will do that. So if I go to Configure Team Coding, you will see we support pretty much all the major version control systems, Git and Subversion, Team Foundation Server, PowerFirst, Mercurial seem to be the most common. And then just via this button here, you can set up your connection to the source control system. And what will happen then is every time you change an object within the database, so you're always working on the database version of the object, Toad will communicate with Subversion in my example and make sure that the object in Subversion is checked out when I'm working on it. It's checked back in when I'm finished with it, and you can create new versions as you go along then in Subversion. Now you may come up with a scenario that the version in the database and the version in your source control management system will go out of sync. Someone goes in using SQL Developer or SQL Plus and makes a change. Toad would not be aware of that. And then when Toad loads it from the database the next time, it does a comparison against Subversion and it sees differences. So then you decide, okay, which is the most important, the database version, the version control software version, or do I just prompt the user and let them decide which one to pick? So that's what you can do there. You can force comments on check-in and check-out. And how it all links together then is through projects. So you create a project or in your version control system, and you also create a project in Team Coding in Toad. And then you select what objects you want. So you can select from multiple schemas, and then you can select different object types, and then you can select specific objects by name. So you can do wildcards and include or exclude certain objects. So you'll get down to the exact objects that you want to version control. So once you do that, what will happen is, if I go into my schema browser and say I open up a particular procedure, just double click on it, we'll load it into my editor, and you can see here I get this screen. Sergey, would you mind muting some of the lines? So here it's asking me for a comment.
Dennis, sorry to interrupt you. We have some problems with the sound. Let's wait for a moment.
No problem.
Everybody is already muted. I'm just checking it and muting new arrivals.
Сергей, скажи, пожалуйста, нашим слушателям, как можно решить проблему со звуком.
Сергей. Да, я тут. На самом деле, господа, можно как решить? Если вы подсоединились к приложению, то вы видите экран. Хотя, в принципе, кому это можно объяснять, если они не слышат.
Да, Сереж, помоги, пожалуйста.
Валюша, замьють, пожалуйста, очень большой снимай.
Хорошо.
Okay, I mute everyone. Alexei, can we go ahead?
Okay. So when I try to open the database version, the object from the database, TAdviser is after communicating with Subversion to also check it out of Subversion. So I'm just going to... I'm also going to check so it will automatically check the object out of Subversion. So I have to enter a comment. Now it's loading the database version, and you can see here it tells me it's also checked out of Subversion. And I can look into Subversion if I want. So I can go into SVN, which is Subversion. I created a project called Demo. The instance is PDB dev. The schema is Quest. And I have a folder for each type of object. So this is a procedure. And you can see here, remove room by name is checked out. And the others are available. So make whatever changes I need to make, execute it within the database, and then I can check it back in or simply close it. Will automatically check it back in. So I have to put a comment again, and you can see here as soon as it's checked back in, it becomes available again. So all I'm doing is working on the database version of the object, and I never have to worry then about the version controlling. It's completely automated between
Вебинар по TAdviser.
Between TAdviser and the
Sorry, I'll mute.
It's Edward.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, so that's completely automated then. And that's really as simple as it is. Once you go into team coding and configure, and once you set up the integration, and once you pick what objects you want to version control, pick the settings such as forcing comments, etc. It automatically enforces it. So nobody can override it then. So you can create administration privileges on this configuration button. So no developer can overwrite it and take themselves out of team coding. So all the work they do within TAdviser is automatically version controlled. So it's quite an easy process to set up. It's actually been within TAdviser for Oracle for, I would say, 10-15 years. It's just, I think it's version controlling database objects is just a new concept really in the Oracle world. So the next one I want to talk about, so we version control. Now we want to do our code reviews. And we have the module code analysis that I mentioned was like spelling and grammar check in Microsoft Word. So this is set up in View, TAdviser Options. And if I go to code analysis, and select Edit Rules. So these are all the code analysis rules that are pre-built, and you can create your own. So you can create your own rule from scratch if you like. So all the rules are listed here, and you can see they're ordered by severity. So some are just informational, some are warning, and some are severe. Then the rules have different objectives. Some are to do with the code correctness, code maintainability, naming conventions, and then we have different categories. So they might have to do exception handling, SQL statements, cursors, commenting, etc. Over here on the right hand side we have some test code. So if you're looking at a specific rule and you want to understand how it actually works, the test code will show you. So it'll show you that this particular example will flag the code, and then the tip will give you just extra information about the rule. So if I just look at maybe 3 or 4 rules, we will look at this one here. Yeah, a very simple one. Use a string variable to execute dynamic SQL. So this is the bad code and this is the good code. And you can see here under the tip, it gives you more bad code and more good code. So it'll just show you, these will return the exact same results, but this is adhering to the rule and this is not adhering to the rule. If we look at the next one, it's probably the most common one used. Cursor is not closed when leaving the scope. And you can see here in our test code, we declare a cursor, we open the cursor, we close the cursor, we open the cursor again, and it doesn't get closed. And it'll explain to the developer, it's going to take up memory in your SGA, you're going to lead to ORA 1000 errors, and it's going to cause a problem. Look at another couple, 2803. So this is if you use a lot, or your customer uses a lot of legacy code that was developed maybe in Oracle 8 or 9, and they're using data types or that are deprecated. For example, if they use a long data type, and it tells you here long is discontinued, and you must migrate to the lob column. And one more, which is useful, if you don't own the Oracle tuning pack or diagnostic pack, or if you use Oracle Standard Edition, this will alert developers of certain procedures within Oracle that require additional licensing. Now the funny thing about Oracle is, you're not allowed to use these, but it doesn't disable them. They're still available to use. So a developer might not understand, see something on Google, oh, I heard that this will solve my problem, and start using it without realizing they've actually enabled an Oracle Enterprise feature, and then Oracle come in and do an audit, and they want lots of money. So this will flag it to a developer. If you run this, you're enabling extra Oracle licensable features. So they're the type of codes. There's many rules. Now some of them will not be relevant to you. They're just they won't come up. So what you do is you create a rule set. So if you look at the rule sets, there are 12 rule sets that are pre-built that contain different rules. But again, you can create your own rule set. You can edit a rule set to decide what rules are relevant to you. And you can have multiple rule sets. So you might have one rule set for an OLTP system, another rule set for a data warehousing system, different rule sets for junior developers or senior developers. So in everybody's taught for Oracle, they decide on their default rule set. So when you're in taught for Oracle, so I go back to pick this one. So load it in. So you can see here, it has put some lines underneath my code. So there are some some issues with my code. And again, if I start typing, so I add in a total number, it will immediately underline that particular rule. So to see the issue, it will actually pop up, but I think it's because I'm on recording WebEx. The pop-ups are, oh, it's almost there. It's coming and going pretty quickly for some reason. But you can also right-click and look at the rule violation here. So you can see, okay, don't declare a number without precision. And the same applies for integer. So I need to put in some kind of precision on this to get rid of the rule. You can also change your rule set. So if I want to go to code correctness, now there's only one left. So I can look at code correctness, has a different set of rules, and this is the particular rule in question. So different rule sets contain different rules. And you can also, it'll apply as you're typing. As you're typing, as you're working, it will apply the rules. You can also apply it to legacy code. So if I want to run code analysis against my procedures, I can add extra objects. I can go to different schemas, pull in my functions, select my rule set, and execute. So what it's doing here, it's looking at, there's 3 industry standards for code quality. Halstead volume, McCabe cyclomatic, and maintainability index. Now, these numbers don't really mean anything, to a normal developer. It's hard to understand if they're good or bad. So we created a Toad code rating that amalgamates these 3 numbers and the number of rule violations and gives a number between 1 and 4. So 1 being the best, 4 being the worst. So very simplistic, scale of 1 to 4, how good is my code? So look at maybe the top one here. It has 4 rule violations, particular procedure. So I can drill down and look at the rule violations. And you can see here, I would highlight the line where the particular rule violation occurred. So you can see the individual violations. Again, if I want to look at this particular one, there was 1 rule violation there as well. So it'll flag up those. You can also save the results into a database table, and then you can do reporting on that table as well, which is quite useful. So you can create a Toad schema. All these results will save into a Toad schema, and then maybe through your BI tool or just running queries and creating reports, you can see the history of your code. So you can see is your code getting better or worse over time. So in 3 months' time, if I make a change and it changes it to Toad code rating 2, if I save that in the database, you'll see, okay, Dennis made a change to this procedure. Before the change, it was Toad code rating 1. After the change, it was Toad code rating 2. Whatever change Dennis made the code worse quality. So it's kind of good to know. So I'll just close that. I'm conscious of time. We only have about 15 minutes left. I suppose the big one that people will look at is unit testing. So it's quite easy to set up the version control, team coding. It's quite easy to enable code analysis. And the one that will take a lot of time is creating unit tests. So I'm just going to use this particular procedure. So it's a very simple procedure. There's no need to have a complicated procedure. Remove room by name. I pass in the name of a room, and it deletes the room from a table. If I pass in null, I get an exception. I also have 2 tables, rooms, and select star from room contents. So I pass in the name of a procedure, or pass in the name of a room, one of these rooms, and it will delete it from the table. But I also have a child table where the room key is the foreign key. So if I try to delete rooms 1, 2, and 3 from the rooms table, Oracle will prevent that because of the foreign key constraint. So I want to test 3 things. What happens if I pass in a room that doesn't have contents? What happens if I pass in a room that does have contents? And what happens if I pass in null? 3 unit tests for this procedure. So I'm going to jump out to code tester for Oracle. This is where we create the unit tests. So log on to our database and go to tests. And I'm going to create a new test definition. So a test definition is a group of tests. So select what schema and what object. So I select remove room by name. So it's created a test definition called test for remove room by name. And down the left hand side, I can create all my test cases. So create new test. So the first thing I want to check is room with contents. So there's 2 pieces of information I need to give the tool in order for it to make the unit test. The first thing is I need to give it an input, and then I need to give it the expected outcomes based on those inputs. So in terms of inputs, you can put in a literal value. So I could just put in the name of a room. So I could just select one of the rooms. Now, if I select, sorry, I'll just room without contents, sorry. Room without contents. So I know that, say, bathroom doesn't have contents. So I could put in bathroom. But there's no reason why tomorrow bathroom will have contents and then my test is invalid. So what I'll do is I'll use a select statement that will always select a room that doesn't have contents. Or else you could put in multiple values. So I'll always select a room without contents. So that's my input. My outcome then is I expect that room to be deleted from the rooms table. So I tell it the change is to a table. The table in question is the rooms table. And what I expect is one or more rows to be deleted. And so to keep it simple, all I want to say is the count after is less than the count before. So the number of rows in the table after the procedure is ran is less than the number of rows beforehand. So some rows have been deleted. That's all I wanted to say. Save and close. So now it's created this procedure and it has one test, remove rooms without contents. So I'm going to run that. And we can see here, I made a mistake. Let's run that again. Sorry, I made some error. So all the tests are saved into the schema. So if I go to my, sorry about this. Looking for the actual test. Invalid objects. I'm not sure which scheme it's in. Okay, it's here. Just need to check the error. I think I call the rooms I made some error on the test, so what I'm going to do is edit that. Oh, sorry, I checked the wrong box there. It's in a different schema, so I never included the schema name. That's all that's happening there. So, because it's PL SQL code, I just need to recompile it, and hopefully that will run now. Yeah. So it ran successfully because the row count was less than before. So now I'm going to add in another test. So just right-click, Add Test. And now I'm going to check for a room with contents. Again, I can put in a literal or I can put in an expression. Expression is better because it'll always be correct. So that's my input, and my expected outcome now is if a room has contents, I should get an ORA error. So I should get an exception. And if I know what the ORA error is, I can put in the code, or else I can just say raise any error. So again, recompile, right click and run those. Just look at the last run, 2 tests, and the second one, it raised the ORA 02292. So it passed because it raised any ORA error. And then my final test, one more test, is what happens if I pass in null. So just put in null. So just make sure null is checked on here. And again, I expect an exception. And this time I know what the exception number is because it's in my code. And save and close. Recompile again and run. And again, all 3 ran successfully because that one was picked up. So these are all saved back into the centralized repository, which is in the same Oracle instance as the objects that are being tested. So when you back up your object, you also back up the test. You can also version control the unit tests. So when you're setting up team coding, you will see that unit tests can be version controlled as well. So for every version of your procedure, you can have a version of the unit. And again, because they're saved in the centralized repository, any developer can call these unit tests from Toad. So I just click this button here, and you can see it's pulled up the 3 tests. And I can just run those 3 tests. They all ran successfully. And I know I haven't broken something that was previously working. So if I do something silly like change the error code, execute that, now run my tests, one has failed because it was expecting 20105. So I change it back. Oops. So it will tell you if you've broken something that was previously working, I suppose, is the idea. So that's the idea behind unit testing. So if you look at, it took us maybe 5 minutes to create those unit tests. And you can see here, you can actually look at the code. It's created spec is about 40 lines. The body is about 970 lines. So you've created 1,000 lines of code for the test. To test a procedure, it's only 14 lines. So, the amount of coding required to create a test is far more than the actual code itself. So, having a tool like this will save you a lot of time. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to quickly move on. The final part was creating this, the execution scripts. So again, I'm doing this all manually, and then I'll show the automation of this. So the easiest way to create release scripts is to use the schema compare. So compare dev against, that's a snapshot, I'll get rid of that. Compare dev against production. Pick what objects. You can filter out different objects' names. I'm just going to compare everything. So this will show me the differences between my two schemas, and I'll use that then as my execution, my release script. So we can see here the differences in the summary. One object only exists in prod, 35 objects only exist in dev. And if I run this script in prod, it'll make it look like dev. Now it's only DDL, it doesn't update any data. So you would also have to do a data compare. So you run a data compare. If you want to do single objects and not a whole schema, you can do single objects as well. But you'll end up with a number of these scripts that you can then run and execute. And obviously, executing them, you execute them in the editor of Toad. So that's how you do all the manual steps. Then we move on to the automation steps. So I'm using Jenkins, and there is a Toad DevOps plugin for Jenkins. So if you go to Jenkins and go to Plugin Manager, we'll see under Installed, Continuous Integration with Toad DevOps Toolkit. You just plug it in. So then when you're creating jobs, you can incorporate some of those things. So I created, I have a couple of different jobs here. The first one is doing individual objects. So what I did, so my Toad for Oracle is integrated with Subversion, and I've also integrated Subversion with Jenkins. So once I check an object into, so this is checked out, once I check it back in, it will create a new revision in Subversion. So I've integrated Subversion in my Jenkins, and every time every 5 minutes, it goes and it sees if there are any new versions of the objects. If it is, what it does is it does a simple copy it to a staging folder. So then I have another job that will run the code analysis. So I'm running my code reviews. So I've grabbed the new version of the particular object. And you can see here using, oh sorry, that's my masking. Using the plugin, Perform Code Analysis with Toad DevOps Toolkit, logging into dev, into the staging folder that I copied the new version of the object, and run code analysis using my top 20 rule set. And my fail conditions is it must be a Toad code rating of 1 or 2. So that's the second job. The third job then is going to run the unit tests. So created another job, run unit tests with Toad DevOps Toolkit, log into dev, specify, I just hard-coded one particular object, test this particular object, and send the results in an XML output to this particular folder. And I also send all the results out to Slack. And then finally, if all of those pass, we release the changes to production. So this is where I have to use just a PowerShell script. So execute script with Toad DevOps Toolkit, log into production this time, grab the file from the staging folder, and this gives me my output report. And again, tell me if a pass or fail in Slack. So if I go back to Toad for Oracle, and I increase this to 2.2.43, 143. If I look into production, and go to procedures, It's 2.2 is 0.142, and in Dev it's 143. And now I'm going to check that in to my version control. So there's a new version in version control. Now, if I waited 5 minutes, it would happen automatically, but I'm just going to kick off the job. Capture new versions from Subversion. And build that now. Go back to my dashboard. I'll also open Slack, and it will give me an update in Slack as well. So it grabbed the new version, and now it's going to run the code review. Running the code review. So if I go into Jenkins here, so it captured a new version from Subversion. It's ran the code reviews. You can see the green tells me it's ran successfully. Now it's going to try and run the unit tests. Takes a bit long. So the unit test ran successfully. So now it's going to actually execute it into production. And it's released it into production. So if I go back to Toad for Oracle, 143. If I go into prod now, refresh this, it should go to 143. And it's updated. It's automatically sent it into production. Now, if I do something silly like, check this out again. And I break one of the tests like I did earlier. So execute that and check it in. Now, if I try to run all this again, oh, sorry, I never put a new version number. Sorry.
Sure.
So 1.4.5, we'll say. So this has a bug. 145 has a bug. Now it's checked into Subversion. I'll just manually kick this off. I watch Slack now. So it's grabbed a new version. That's fine. There's a new version. It's captured it. It's going to run the code reviews. The code review hasn't changed. So, you know, quality-wise, it's still okay. It's the functional testing it should fail on. So the code analysis passed okay. And you can see it's failed on the unit testing. So it will never go on to the next step. It's never going to release the change into production. So 145 will not make its way into production now. It'll stay at 143. So they're the kind of things you can do. You can also do it at a schema level rather than at an object level. So in this particular task, I'm not deploying directly into production. I just want to create a production-ready release. So again, I can go through the stage of running the code review against all my code, running the unit tests. But instead of deploying to production, I just wanted to create an execution script that I can manually run myself. So this is where you have to use the PowerShell, just this one step. So you decide what objects you want to compare. And if I just go back and, sorry, I just need to get the folder. So it's going to create my output script here. Build this now. This may take about 30 seconds. open the folder while I'm waiting. So that ran successfully. So 12:35. So it gives me the results in HTML and CSV and TXT to review, but I also get the SQL statement. So it's gone onto my other screen. One moment. So I can run this script in production now, and it'll execute all these changes. So this is the probably where most companies are looking to get for. Automate the code reviews, automate the unit tests, and automate the creation of the release script. But I still want to manually review and execute it. So that's probably more of a realistic level as to where companies want to go. So I suppose just to recap, since we moved over to WebEx, first of all, we did the version control integration. From that, then we did the manual code reviews, we did the manual unit testing, the manual script creation here with the schema compare and data compares. And then we moved into Jenkins, and we showed how it's possible to automate the unit testing, automate the code reviews, automate the script creation and execution. And once you hook up Toad for Oracle with Subversion, and you hook up Subversion with Jenkins, and you hook up Toad DevOps Toolkit with Jenkins, you got the full loop. So Jenkins can talk to Toad, Toad can talk to Subversion, Subversion can talk to Jenkins, and around you go. So you have the circle is complete, and they can all communicate with each other. So sorry, I think we were supposed to finish at 12:30, so I'm slightly gone over time on that. Apologies for that. I'm okay for a few minutes if there are any questions to be raised.
Господа, есть ли у вас какие-то вопросы к вышерассказанному и вышепоказанному?
Hello?
Yeah, we are hearing you.
Question about the version of the procedure you want to change manually. Can I have version generated from the source control automatically?
That's a good question. That's something we're working on at the moment. At the moment, you can do it manually in Toad for Oracle, but we haven't automated that yet in the Toad DevOps Toolkit, that you can run it from the CI server or from any server. Just to note as well, when I showed you everything running through Jenkins, but you can just as easily use the scripts. The scripts are pre-built, so if you want to do run a code analysis, you just change your username and password and configure that. But to do that, what I would do is go to compare single object. You can then compare a particular object, such as procedure, remove room by name, and you can compare it against a file. So you can then, I'm not sure if I have a remove room by name. I could go into, this is my SVN working directory, and I could compare them, and you can see the differences: 145 and 143. 1204. The execution number is different. We just haven't, as of yet, made that available in the automation tool.
We have a very, let's see, we have a very long question in the chat.
Yes, I'll read it out. I have a question connected to Oracle. As you know, Oracle database shift to a more frequent version release. Every year, new major release with 1 5-year support. In this case, customers need to implement new versions quite frequent. It's connected with issues of compatibility, app performance, and so on. Oracle offers a solution for this engineered system, RAT or real application testing.
is it any integration between Toad, Oracle DB, Exadata, and Oracle RAP? Do you have a similar experience, or are there any other Quest tools which could be helpful? Yes, we have an alternative to real application testing. It's called Benchmark Factory, and it's very similar to what RAP does. And it also works on SQL Server, so it's available for Oracle and SQL Server. That's in the next phase of the Toad DevOps Toolkit. The next phase is going to add the benchmark testing and the scalability testing, and also the SQL optimization. We have a tool called SQL Optimizer, and they're the kind of next couple of phases in terms of what are we going to automate next. We're going to automate the scalability testing, the impact analysis testing of going through different Oracle versions and patches, and also the optimization of SQL. So I know it's on the roadmap. I've absolutely no date as to when that's going to happen, but that's the plan. Another question in, with Git, does it work the same way? Any use of pull request branches, etc.? Yeah, so it works the exact same way with Git. Now, if you're using Git, is obviously a distributed version control system. So you have the option of Toad communicating with the local repository or directly to GitHub. If it connects directly to the local repository, you did have a function, I can't show you because I'm using Subversion, but there is a function then within Toad that will allow you to push from the local repository up to GitHub. So yeah, we have, it works the same way, but again, because of the distributed nature, there might be an extra step where you need to push from local to GitHub. And in terms of branching, yeah, you can do, again, if it's distributed system, it's not something I've ever worked with, but you can have obviously different local repositories. Or if you want to do branching, you can do different projects. So the team coding project, you can have multiple team coding projects as well. But branching is mainly done in the source control management system. We don't do branching in team coding, but you can connect to a branch, I guess, of Subversion. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I hope so. Окей. Коллеги, есть ли у вас какие-то еще вопросы? Коллеги? Коллеги, ну хорошо. Если у вас нету вопросов, тогда я думаю, что... Марат, of course. Конечно, мы можем предоставить реальную версию. Вот, собственно, пожалуйста, свяжитесь, наверное, с Алексеем, да?
Да, Сереж, обязательно мы можем предоставить реальную версию, но я непосредственно уже со всеми участниками вебинара свяжусь после, хочу получить какой-то фидбэк, в принципе, и мы сможем отправить триалки, и, собственно, все можно потестировать, посмотреть, это не проблема. Есть какие-то еще вопросы, коллеги?
Коллеги, какие-нибудь еще вопросы? Да, yes, Alexei, go ahead, please.
Yes, thanks so much. I would like to thank all colleagues for the attention, and especially thank Dennis for this webinar. It was a wonderful experience for our company, first English seminar, and nevertheless was some problems with connection. I think we decide this problem, and in near future we will receive a full version of the webinar. so I'll send it for all our colleagues. Dennis, thank you so much.
Much pleasure. David.
Yeah, Dennis, thank you so much. If you all got any questions about those, I'll definitely send them to you. So thanks for your time. That was awesome as usual. And have a good day, then.
Так, коллеги, спасибо большое. Я свяжусь с вами в ближайшее время, еще раз повторюсь. Всего вам доброго. До свидания.
Да, коллеги, огромное спасибо. Мы попозже направим запись всех частей. Спасибо и всего доброго.